Hey guys, this is going to be a pretty out there theory that I am confident is true, and if it's not, I'm gonna be happy to take a giant L on this. But this video is also going to be very, very spoiler heavy. So if you're not up to date with chapter 1024, exit out of this video right away, because it's going to contain a lot of heavy spoilers from the recent chapter that didn't even come out in the official Viz yet. So if you only read the Viz version, wait until Sunday when the chapter comes out before you watch this video, because it's going to be really spoiler heavy. Now that all of now that all that is out of the way, the theory basically is about who Zoro is, where he comes from, who his parents are, and basically what his whole backstory is. And how does it tie to Wano? How did he get out of Wano, etc. Now, Oda has been dropping several hints, or in my opinion, red herrings, which are leading the vast majority of the community, or pretty much everybody that I've seen, except me, believe that Zoro is Shimotsuki Ushimaru's son. And we see him in prison in the most recent chapter, helping out Yamato escape. But here's the problem, or basically there's a few main problems. One is Zoro is 21 years old in the current day. So that means that the time we see Shimotsuki Ushimaru in prison, Zoro had to be at most 1 year old. And I don't see how a 1-year-old boy has managed to escape Wano by himself when the gates are closed and when Kaido is in control. That's one problem. Another problem is that we know that there haven't been any escapes from Wano for 55 years, with the exception of Oden's escapade. So besides Oden, the only other known incident in which people escaped Wano was 55 years ago with Shimotsuki Kozaburo, basically Ushimaru's ancestor, who is also Shimotsuki Ryuma's offspring. Okay, now those are two pretty huge problems, but another huge problem is that when Zoro was a kid, it's not as if they dropped him off in the Shimotsuki dojo to be taken care of by his teacher and by his girlfriend, who are also Shimotsukis. And that is what's weird here, because they well, of course it looked as if they didn't know that Zoro's related to them in any way, and neither did Zoro know that he's related to them in any way, and it looked like he kind of had a crush on Kuina. So, and it didn't really look as if Koshiro, her father, treated him as his boy, or more like he treated him as a prodigy student, but Kuina was still his daughter. And it's true that he did treat him as a fighter that will inherit the dojo because he's a boy and Kuina couldn't, blah blah blah. But that wasn't really. But if Kuina was a boy, she would inherit the dojo, even though Zoro's also Shimotsuki. But it really does look as if none of them have any idea that Zoro himself is a Shimotsuki. And if he was sent there as a 1-year-old for them to take care of him, then I don't see how that would be the case. It would seem as if they would have to be aware that he is related to them directly. So, what do I think is the case here then? Who is Zoro's parents, and how is Zoro tied to Wano? Well, Zoro is 21 years old, but my theory says that he wasn't born 21 years ago. Instead, he was born hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, in ancient Wano. I believe that Zoro is Ryuma's son, or at least a very recent offspring of Ryuma, and I believe that Lady Toki, who knew Ryuma, or had to know Ryuma because she said herself that she was from Wano in the past. Okay, it is very likely that she knew Ryuma. So what do I think happened? I'll draw the timeline, and it's going to be a lot easier to understand if I just explain my timeline, and as I go, I'll explain how things fit with this timeline, and how this timeline does actually fit a lot of things that might seem insignificant in the story, but it actually, those little details help tie this whole thing together. So here's the timeline. Lady Toki, who I theorize is aware of the prophecy of the dawn, and is also aware of a bunch of future events that are supposed to happen according to this prophecy. I think that she knew that Zoro had to have some kind of involvement, or that she had to save him and take him out of Wano for some other different reason that we don't know of yet. But for whatever the case is, she needed to take Zoro out of Wano. I theorize that it's due to the prophecy that she knew that he's going to be a part of the group of people who bring about the new dawn. And she needed to escape Wano with him. She needed to get him out of Wano. But her power doesn't allow her to travel through space, only through time. So she jumped towards 55 years from the past of the current day in One Piece. Basically, she traveled to 55 years in the past in Wano with Zoro as a baby, and either knew that Shimotsuki Kozaburo is intending to leave Wano, or convinced him to leave Wano in order for Zoro to be able to escape, which I think is the more likely option here, and convinced him to leave Wano, and found the Shimotsuki village. So she traveled through time to 55 years ago, where she actually traveled physically from Wano, outside of Wano. There, 55 years ago in the past, she sent Zoro ahead to 21 or 20 years in the past. Basically, at this point where Zoro was sent to is simultaneous with when Shimotsuki Ushimaru is in prison, which now solves the problem of him being only 21 years old, because, okay, Shimotsuki Ushimaru isn't really the father of Zoro, so it has absolutely no relevance that he's in prison right now. And the fact that Zoro is indeed Ryuma's son does also explain how he looks exactly like them, because they look exactly like Ryuma, and they're all Shimotsukis, so of course they're going to look a lot like Ryuma, or in other words, they're going to look also a lot like Ryuma's son, who is Zoro. Now, things are starting to look a little bit like they're making sense, so let me continue. Now, Toki sent him alone into the future because she knew that she still had to get back to Wano. And so she jumped back in time in order to try to find ways to get back to Wano. And that is the point where we found her in the story. Because we never were aware of Toki leaving Wano, or why she left Wano, or how, or when, or anything like that. The only thing we know is that we found her outside of Wano, while Oden was traveling with Whitebeard. So that would explain how Toki found herself outside of Wano, and where we picked up the story in Oden's flashback 20 years ago. So she sent herself 35 years into the future, where she came across Oden, or maybe she had to do several jumps in order to escape people trying to catch her or capture her, like we found 20 years ago during Oden's voyage. And that's where the story picks up, where she joins Oden in order to go back to Wano. She didn't know she's gonna meet Oden outside of Wano. I think she believed that for the prophecy to be fulfilled and for her to bring about the dawn, she was still needed back in Wano. But I don't think she was perfectly aware that part of her destiny was also for her destiny to be fulfilled, she would need to meet Odin, who is also part of the prophecy. And all of these are, well, maybe not the prophecy, but part of the destiny of the group that will bring about the dawn that the prophecy prophesizes about. So this theory basically settles all of these points that I brought up as problems for why Ushimaru can't be Zoro's dad, or why it's unlikely that Ushimaru is Zoro's dad. And it also happens to explain how Toki found herself where she was, trying to get back to Wano alone, how she got out of Wano in the first place, and all the rest of the backstory of Lady Toki. And if Zoro is Ryuma's son, that also ties in together with the fact that Zoro was based on the character model of Ryuma, who, to those of you who don't know, existed even before One Piece in Oda's one shot, where Ryuma looked exactly like Zoro, and Oda just took Ryuma's character design and implemented it to be Zoro. And that's a pretty interesting way for him to tie it all together, and why they all look so similar to each other. Let me know what you guys think about this theory, or if you find any problems with the chronology, because I'll also explain why I think, for example, that Toki had to send Zoro by himself. First of all, she needed to get back to Wano, which usually you would assume that she would just stay there to protect Zoro and take care of him and stuff like that and raise him, and then she could have just brought him to 20 years in the past and just raised him up until he met Luffy. But then she couldn't fulfill her side of the destiny, so she just transferred him into the future. Now, in the future of the Shimotsuki village, nobody knows that Zoro is actually their relative. They just know him as some kid without any family and without any parents, who fights with a bunch of swords and happens to feel three sword style very comfortable, and who tries to basically take over the dojo or fight or whatever. I barely remember like Zoro's original backstory. I probably should revisit that, but pretty much I'm confident that he didn't just grow up in that dojo, but that they kind of adopted him into the dojo as like a kind of delinquent kid who's a troublemaker in the village. Okay, thanks guys. Comment and let me know what you guys think about this, and if you find any flaws, I would be really grateful if you comment about them, because again, I would like to know if my theory is wrong as much as I would like to know if my theory is right. Have a good day, guys.